life stories. Subscribe now to begin today's emotional journey. What would you do if the child you sacrificed everything for shut you out on the most important day of his life? In today's story, a mother who pawned her wedding ring to pay for her son's lavish wedding is turned away at the door, not by mistake, but by choice. What unfolds next is a heartbreaking unraveling of lies, betrayal, and painful truths that no parent ever wants to face. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's powerful tale, a story of love, loss, and the quiet strength it takes to let go. I stood there at the entrance of the Marigold Hotel in Charleston, staring past the velvet ropes and floral arches, trying to make sense of the moment. The security guard's hand pressed against my shoulder like a brick wall. "Family only," he said, his voice flat, rehearsed, like he'd repeated that phrase 100 times today. I looked up at him, my voice caught somewhere between disbelief and heartache. "I'm Brandon's mother." He didn't even blink. "Ma'am, your name's not on the list." I tried to process those words as they sank into my chest like a stone. I stood there in the dress I'd spent 3 months' worth of night shifts to afford, its soft navy fabric hugging me with fragile pride. In my hands was a crystal vase wrapped in silver paper and a satin bow, 6 months of savings and sacrifice distilled into one object. My fingers trembled around it, suddenly unsure of what to do with something that was clearly no longer welcome. Behind the guard, through the golden doors of the reception hall, I caught a glimpse of my son. Brandon stood tall, polished in a tailored tuxedo, bathed in warm light and surrounded by people who looked like they had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Perfect teeth, perfect hands, perfect lives. Our eyes met for the briefest second. I waited for a spark of recognition, for warmth, for love. But instead, he turned his head. Deliberately, slowly. Then leaned in to whisper something to Madison, his bride, who barely glanced toward the door. Just 10 minutes earlier, I had watched the wedding from across the street, hidden behind an old sycamore tree like some outcast criminal. I'd seen Brandon, my only child, the boy I had raised on peanut butter sandwiches and bedtime stories, say his vows to a woman I'd only met twice. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing as guests in designer suits and glittering dresses filled the venue. People who would witness what I had dreamed of seeing since the day I first held him in my arms. The guard stepped inside for a moment. I watched him approach Brandon, who gave a dismissive glance in my direction. I waited. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they'd let me in. But when the guard returned, he looked at me with the same neutral expression. "Sir says there's been a misunderstanding. He confirms you weren't invited." And that was it. Something inside me broke. Not with fury, not with outrage, but with a quiet, aching certainty. All those nights I'd worked double shifts so Brandon could have what other kids took for granted. The years I'd stretched every dollar, scraped together tuition by scrubbing other people's toilets, made birthday cakes from scratch because store-bought was a luxury. I had sacrificed everything. And now I wasn't even considered family. I stepped past the guard before he could stop me, my heels clicking like thunder on the marble floor. I walked into that reception hall with a heart pounding so loudly I was sure the music faltered because of it. Heads turned. Conversations halted. Every eye was on me. I stopped at the center of the room. Brandon stood frozen by the head table. Madison clutched his arm. Her father rose from his seat, his brow furrowed, his posture protective. "This is my son's wedding," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I sold my wedding ring to help pay for it." Silence. I could hear the clinking of ice in glasses. I could hear the distance between me and my son growing wider. Vanessa's father, Douglas Harrington, stepped forward. "Mrs. Crawford, this is unfortunate. Brandon told us you agreed not to attend. He said you were dealing with some personal issues." I looked at Brandon. I waited. One word, one gesture, one sign that I still mattered. But he said nothing. My grip tightened on the vase. "Nathan," I said. He cleared his throat. "Mom, this isn't the time or place. We can talk about this later." Later. That word landed with a cruel finality. When exactly would that be? After he'd rewritten his story without me in it? After he'd buried every trace of where he came from? Something shifted in me in that moment. Not rage, not even grief, something deeper. The slow, painful realization that love alone doesn't guarantee a place at someone's table. And that sometimes you can give everything to a child, your love, your time, your future, and still end up standing outside the doors of their new life, clutching a gift no one wants. The silence in the reception hall was suffocating. I could feel the weight of every gaze pressing into my skin, but I stood my ground. My heart, though cracked in 100 places, beat with a strange clarity. I hadn't come to cause a scene. I had come because I still believed I had a place in my son's life. I still believed I mattered. I wanted to give you this, I said softly, raising the crystal vase, its facets catching the light. But I think I have something more valuable to offer instead. From my purse, I pulled out a folded piece of paper, shaky hands now steady. What I'm about to tell you, I said, eyes locked with Madison's father, will change everything in this room. And it starts with what your future son-in-law did with the money from my wedding ring. Brandon's face twisted from embarrassment to alarm. He started moving toward me, but I spoke before he could reach me. That money never went to the venue, I said, my voice echoing through the hall. The deposit had already been paid in full by Madison's parents. The room rippled with gasps. Your son, I continued, used my ring, my last valuable possession, to pay off gambling debts. He pawned it and lost the money in one night. No, Brandon snapped. Stop, you're ruining everything. I turned to face him fully. I ruined everything? My voice broke despite myself. I worked 3 jobs after your father left. I skipped meals so you could eat. I wore the same shoes for 5 years so you could have what your friends had. And I'm ruining everything? Douglas Harrington stepped forward, his tone cooler now. Mrs. Crawford, I think you should leave. Whatever this is, it can be dealt with privately. But I wasn't done. I turned to Madison. Did you know, I asked, about his gambling? The creditors? The men who came to my apartment asking for him? Her face went pale. What? She doesn't know anything, Brandon said quickly. This is all a huge misunderstanding. No, I said. Tell them about the calls, about the threats, about the fake stories you told me when I asked where the money went. I set the vase down. I didn't come to destroy your wedding. I came because I thought I still had a son who wanted me in his life. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the boy who drew me homemade cards that said "World's Best Mom." And just as quickly, I saw that boy vanish. Then, unexpectedly, Madison stepped forward. I want to hear more, she said, her voice calm, her eyes sharp. Is it true? She turned to Brandon. Do you have a gambling problem? The room stilled again. It's under control, Brandon muttered. Just a rough patch. I haven't placed a bet in weeks. I gave a hollow laugh. That's what your father used to say, too. Don't compare me to him, Brandon snapped. Then prove it, I said, my voice steady now. Tell the truth. Brandon faltered. Madison's father cleared his throat. Brandon, we need to talk now. And just like that, the fairy tale cracked. The carefully curated illusion of success and love and wealth began to fall apart, piece by piece. The wedding wasn't over, but it was no longer a celebration. It was a reckoning. What followed felt like slow motion. Brandon being led into a side room with Douglas Harrington, hushed whispers rippling through the reception hall like a rising storm. Guests began forming quiet clusters, exchanging glances, avoiding my eyes. I stood there unsure whether I just defended my dignity or detonated my family. I was about to leave when Madison appeared beside me, her wedding dress slightly wrinkled now, her makeup smeared from tears. In her hands was the crystal vase I had left behind. I thought you might want this back, she said. I shook my head. It was a gift. She paused. Mrs. Crawford, may I call you Ellen? That simple request caught me off guard. I nodded. There's something you need to know, she said, lowering her voice. Last week, I found out Brandon has been stealing from my father's company. The world shifted beneath my feet. Stealing? I repeated, barely believing it. She nodded. He created fake vendor accounts. He's been transferring funds, over $200,000. I gave him a chance to come clean, but now I know why he didn't want you here. You'd see right through him. Even after all of this, I wanted to deny it, to believe it wasn't true. But somewhere deep down, I already knew. Brandon reappeared then, his expression dark and cornered. He grabbed Madison's arm. "What are you telling her?" I stepped between them. "Don't touch her." His eyes narrowed. "So now you're taking her side? Your own mother?" "This isn't about sides," I said. "It's about the truth." Brandon lowered his voice, almost hissing. "I did what I had to do. These debts, they're not to casinos. They're to people who don't send reminders. They send threats." "So you stole?" I asked. "It was a loan," he insisted. "I was going to pay it back." "With what?" Madison asked, her voice hollow. "More bets?" He turned to her, suddenly soft, pleading. "Baby, I did it for us. I wanted to give you everything." I could see it now. That same manipulative charm his father used to wear like a second skin, twisting blame into sacrifice, turning his wrongs into gifts. "You said the same things your father did," I said quietly, right before he left. Brandon flinched. Douglas Harrington returned with security and his phone in hand. "We're done here. The police are on their way." Brandon panicked. "You can't. I'll fix it. Mom, tell them. Say it's a mistake." I shook my head. "I can't fix this for you anymore, Brandon." Later that night, at the station, I sat across from him as he stared at the floor, no longer angry, just hollow. He finally whispered, "I wanted to be someone who mattered." "You still can," I said. "But not like this. Not through lies." He gave the authorities everything: his phone, his statements, even recordings he'd secretly made that implicated Douglas in tax fraud. The aftermath was messy. Brandon charged with embezzlement, 2 loan sharks arrested, Harrington under federal investigation. 3 months later, Madison came to my new apartment, smaller and humbler but mine. She handed me a check, $43,000. "It's not from my father," she said. "It's from me. I sold my ring. It's what's right." I didn't know what to say. I only knew one thing: pain doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it clears space for truth, for healing, for something real. Brandon was getting help. I was learning to let go, and that crystal vase now sits on my windowsill. When the morning light hits it just right, the rainbows dance across my wall, a daily reminder that broken things, too, can be beautiful. Brandon is still in treatment now. We speak sometimes, not often, but when we do, there's honesty in his voice I haven't heard since he was a teenager. He's learning to rebuild from the ground up, not just his life, but his sense of self. And I'm doing the same in my own way. I've taken on extra cleaning jobs to cover what was lost, and some days are harder than others. But for the first time in a long time, I feel strong. Not because I've conquered life's challenges, but because I've survived them with my integrity intact. The vase sits in my apartment window, catching the sunlight each morning. I used to think it symbolized sacrifice, the kind only a mother could make. But now I see it differently. It's not just a gift I tried to give. It's a piece of my story, one filled with love, pain, hard lessons, and the quiet courage of letting go. Brandon will face consequences, and maybe that's exactly what he needs to become someone better. Someone true. I'll be there if he chooses that path, but this time, as a guide, not a shield. Life doesn't always give us the storybook endings we imagined. Sometimes it hands us broken glass and asks us to make a window. Sometimes being uninvited from someone's beginning is how you finally start your own. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please subscribe to Life Stories for more true, emotional journeys about love, choices, and the strength it takes to heal. New videos every week. Don't miss the next chapter.